Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Peace and Plenty in 20. I'm your host, Janine. And if you caught last week's episode, you know we went deep into the early origins of my personal diet experience and diet culture in general in our lives. How so many of us were taught from a very young age, as young girls even, that our bodies were a problem that needed to be fixed. And if you haven't listened to that episode yet, definitely push pause here and go back, because it really sets the foundation for what I want to talk about today. Today's episode is personal, it's vulnerable, and I'm doing this episode for all of the women, for you guys who might be somewhere in like the middle in terms of you don't want to continue dieting, but you're also trying to accept your body as is, but you also don't feel your best. And deep down, you know you want something to shift, but you're not even sure like what or how that would look. And it's just too much with everything we have already going on in midlife. So in today's episode, I'm sharing my own story and how I went from resisting treatments like GLP-1s to eventually trying it, to stopping, switching medications, and what's actually helped me feel better without abandoning all of that healing work I did, without letting go of my beliefs about food and body and trusting myself. And I just want to also point out two things. First of all, I am not a doctor. Yes, I am a certified health coach. Yes, I am a certified intuitive eating counselor. Yes, I do have a lot of knowledge on nutrition and health, just both from my past experiences, as well as I talk with my husband a lot. He's in the medical field. So I do have a lot of knowledge, but I just have to put a disclaimer that I am not a doctor, and that is not the capacity in which I'm sharing this episode today. The second thing I want to share is that, again, this is my story and it doesn't have to be yours. But my hope is that it gives you the permission to be truthful with yourself and to tell the truth about your experience and not feel shame or guilt or any negative emotions, but to encourage you to figure out what feels right for you. Okay? So picking up from last week and talking about intuitive eating, I had finally made really good strides and made a lot of peace with my body after years of chronic dieting, definitely some disordered eating habits, and just body shame, and stopped tracking, stopped restricting, stopped moralizing food. I was doing the work. And yet I noticed I was starting to feel stuck again. My labs weren't good. My blood pressure was up. I was diagnosed with sleep apnea and had to start wearing a CPAP machine. My cholesterol was rising. And these are numbers that had been fairly good. I definitely had visible and measurable inflammation. And I also knew that my weight had climbed well above my body's natural set point, which, by the way, is the range that your body tries to return to, like when it's been either starved or stressed or restricted for so long. So even though I hadn't weighed myself in ages, I could feel it, right? In my energy, in my little bit of my joints, even in my breathing, walking upstairs, going to a concert. And I didn't love that, but I also didn't want to diet again. I just also couldn't ignore those things. And I want to be around for the long term. I started to feel I just don't feel great in my body. And I all these health things that are happening, I want to be around for my kids, right? That's why I became a health coach. So I was really in a very difficult, challenging mental place after doing this healing work and after kind of getting to this place. But now, shit, how do I get back, without dieting? I know I'm going to have to restrict to, get back. How am I going to do this? I felt stuck. I couldn't unknow what I now knew about dieting. I was working out, but it was hard with the extra weight. And then I remember talking about this with my coach, or my nutritionist or somebody in the program. I had this fear that I would become obsessive with my working out again, right? Again, this all or nothing I know a lot of you can relate to it. And so I, again, was just trying to figure out, what am I going to do next? And in the meantime, my husband had started Ozempic, and he mentioned it to me. I didn't even know if that was something that I was eligible for, which I actually probably would have been. But I was scared to take a medication and, undo all of this work that I had done. Let me just take a quick pause. For those of you, I'm sure if you watch the news at all, or if you are just in our society, you've heard people talk about Ozempic. And just to clarify exactly what it is, Ozempic is the name brand of a GLP-1 medication, and GLP stands for glucagon-like peptide. And so Ozempic is the brand name for the peptide semaglutide. There's a bunch of different peptides. So GLP-1s are a type of peptide therapy. And a peptide is a short-chain amino acid that basically sends messages and signals to your body. They regulate things like your appetite, your insulin, your inflammation. So in this case, what these glucagon-like peptides do, these GLP-1s, is send signals that help regulate your appetite, your digestion, and your blood sugar. So what happens is you feel full sooner, you stay full longer, and you also have more stable energy because your blood sugar is regulated. Anyway, so again, I resisted it. I had worked so hard to let go of the diet mentality, and that felt very much like a diet mentality. So I did what I always do when I'm wrestling with something big. I just got really curious. I did the research. I set up a call with Emily Sadri, who I have had on my show before, who is a nurse practitioner that left the field of women's medicine. She was a midwife and very, very smart, educated, knowledgeable practitioner. She came from UPenn. I set up a call with her because I had started following her, and I liked the things I was hearing and saying because it felt different than anything I had ever heard before. So I started following her, and then I messaged her on Instagram. We messaged back and forth for a while. She was so open, and I felt very comfortable right away kind of sharing what I was struggling with. Set up a call with her to ask all the questions. I sat with the fears, and the most important thing I did was I processed it with my coach. She knew I was struggling with this decision to join, another program, because that was the last thing I ever wanted to do. But I knew I had to do something. So I had to get super honest with her and share that my fear was this is going to make me a fraud. Here I am talking about intuitive eating and making peace, but then she helped me. We did a lot of work around, well, what's the truth here? My health is at stake. And the other truth is, she's like, you're allowed to do whatever you want. It was that permission thing. In fact, I inspired her to create a whole podcast episode on her podcast. Basically, I think it's called You're Allowed to Change Your Mind. So after lots of annoying messages to Emily and phone calls, and my, what ifs, and my insistence that anyone in Emily's practice that I'd be working with would understand my history, my triggers, my fears, I finally took the leap in January of 2024. I joined her for a year-long program to get my health in order. And one of the first ways I knew I was in the right space, which was I remember in the program module, you get to watch modules as well as have live coaching. Gretchen, who's one of the RDs, was talking about we're approaching this journey with a whole new lens. I think it's actually called Lens. And she touched on a lot of what I had learned and what I had healed in my intuitive eating counselor training. But it was also a different lens of how can we see, what other aspects of this can we look at as health promoting and not just about wanting to shrink our bodies, because that's not what it's about. So working with a nutritionist was a huge step because I did not want to track they encourage you to do that. And I was like, I just can't. I'm not tracking. I can't count my macros. I cannot keep track of my food anymore. To their credit, they were totally understanding of that. It was a very collaborative experience, I have to say, and they were gentle, and we focused just on simple shifts. Like, for example, Renee, who was my RD, wanted me to aim for 100 grams of protein. And, we would go through lists of different foods, and I'm like, nope, I don't like nuts, I don't like cottage cheese, and so we started to explore different ways that I could get that protein in. And it actually became kind of fun. Like, I was like, oh, wow, my collagen that I put in my coffee has some protein in it. So it felt very different than anything I had ever done before. So that was reassuring. So I worked with her on my nutrition, on my movement, and, just getting in the minimal, like if it was 10 minutes a day. And I felt that I was really able to advocate for myself the whole time, but then she would also kind of just remind me of important information to think about. And it was really a supportive team approach. And Emily knew everything that was going on with the patients. But still in March, I think it was, so January, February, March, still they were gently like, hey, do you want to talk about semaglutide, which is the GLP-1 peptide? And I was still hesitant. I was still scared. But through conversation and through them reassuring me that I could stop if I didn't like it, I did start the semaglutide, which is the one behind Ozempic. And I had terrible GI side effects. I don't know how many weeks I did it for, but I was finally like, I can't do this anymore. So I stopped, waited, tried again. Now it was like maybe 6 months into the program, and I said, I'm done. I can't do this. They didn't push me. We still were focusing on all the other health promoting goals that I had. But through my own research, I was reading about the option of a different peptide called tirzepatide. And that's the compound that's in the name brands you hear, Mounjaro or Zepbound. Because I had been reading that tirzepatide caused fewer digestive issues, and I was like, all right, I'm ready to try something else one more time. And that worked. And I actually have stayed on a low dose. I'm at just like half the maximum dose, and that's what I am still on today and what is helping me. And I no longer carry shame around it. And again, making these decisions have to come from what you know is best for you. Also, obviously, with the input of the practitioners, the experts, your doctor, people that you trust. Listen, at the end of the day, you also don't have to listen to what anyone tells you, right? We have autonomy. My point is, here's what I want you to hear most from this episode. For me, I still love food. I still don't use the scale. They would ask me, by the way, I remember with Renee, she's like, what's your weight? I'm like, oh, my clothes definitely feel better, as I was losing. And I really was resistant. So she's like, all right, how about we make a deal like in a month? So I would do it once in a while. To this day, I don't know what I weigh. I know I've lost about 30 pounds, give or take. Again, I honestly don't know the number. I prioritize sleep as much as I can, hydration, movement, all of the things. But the most important outcomes are my blood pressure's down, my inflammation is lower, I have more energy. I graduated, I had a repeat sleep study. I graduated from the CPAP machine. And all of those things feel so good to me that I'm glad that I took the leap and said, let me tune out the noise of what the world is saying, and let me tune out my own noise of saying, you're a fraud if you try this. Because here's the truth. This is not cheating, right? If somebody has some other type of illness or some other type of issue that they struggle with and they take medication to support them, is that cheating? I also have ADHD and I do have to take medication to help me. I don't look at that as cheating. I think it becomes so emotional and charged because of just the shame and the incredible focus that we have on women's bodies and weight. So yes, I am very proud of the basic but powerful changes I've made, meaning now when I eat, I no longer, like, I've really healed from all the Weight Watchers stuff, and instead I still choose what I want to eat, but I know that I need to prioritize protein. I know that I need to keep myself super hydrated. I know that I need greens and fiber, and I'm still mindful about how I nourish myself, not obsessive. And I'm also mindful of the risks, which when using a GLP-1 and you do lose weight, you're losing muscle. And that's something that at our age, midlife women do not want to lose. So muscle loss is a concern. So strength training is really, really important. I also just want to mention, I'm also considering HRT, hormone replacement therapy, in the coming months. Emily is really pushing for this for the purpose of the research, the new research. It is so positive in terms of being cardiac protective and so many other benefits. If you are interested, I can share the information with you. So their practice offers this, and to be honest, I don't have a lot of symptoms, so I'm very lucky in that sense, which is also why I haven't really been pushed to start it. But I'm going to ease in, just like I've done with my journey to this point. I want to make choices for myself from like a grounded place that I feel ready for, not fear, not pressure. So if you're in this place right now where you're also trying to figure out what you want, you're trying to feel better, you're trying to honor your body without falling back into old patterns, I get that, my friend. And I want to pause here to point out to you that moment on the phone. I remember where I was processing my fears and my confusion with my coach around, but this is going to make me a fraud and I feel like I'm cheating. That was the turning point for me. Not because she told me what to do, because she didn't. That's what a good coach does. But because she helped me figure out what I wanted, what aligned with my values, my lifestyle, and how to move forward, the perspective shifts that I needed to move forward without guilt or shame. And that's the kind of space I hold for my clients. I'm not a doctor. I'm not here to prescribe medication or tell you what to eat or if you should use GLP-1s or if you should try something else. But I am here to help you navigate these big decisions in a way that's gentle, in a way that's supportive, and in a way that is true to you and supports what you really want. So whether you're deciding about weight loss or a changing career or relationship issues or starting a new habit or anything that feels complicated and loaded, you don't have to figure it out alone. And if you want that kind of support, I'd love to talk with you. There's a link in my show notes where you can hop on a free call with me, a strategy session, and we look at what is right for you. What is it that you want next? And we can figure that out together. Your action step this week is for you, again, to reflect. I'm doing a lot of reflecting, having you do a lot of reflecting and journaling these days, but unless somebody's telling you to do it, we often do not have time in our day to stop and think and reflect. So I want you to stop and journal, or I want you to stop and reflect, or do a voice note. What is it that you want for yourself that either you haven't given yourself permission to try or to have? Or what is something that you know needs to change, but you feel scared or you feel stuck? And I think getting that out, writing it down, talking about it is the very first step to living true to yourself, to figuring out, while you're taking care of everyone else, what can you do to take care of you, my friend? Because that's the most important thing. So I hope this episode reminds you that you are allowed to explore, you're allowed to change, and you can hold space for both accepting where you are and also evolving. You don't have to justify it to anyone. You also don't have to get it perfect. And let this be a reminder that it's safe. It's okay to want more. You're allowed to evolve. And I believe that's actually the best part of living. This is your life, your body, your journey. Your intuition matters. I'm proud of you, and I'm rooting for you. I'll see you next time. Peace.